few films stand the test of time and continue to be watched by generations of viewers. These classics possess certain key elements. They are historically important. They're action-packed. They have a memorable leader. And the story is true. The story that we're about to share with you has all of these ingredients. It is as historically important as the Alamo, but it has the screen impact of Lawrence of Arabia.
What we've been taught for 450 years is almost all wrong. What we've been taught in our school system is that the first settlers for the United States was England. But it didn't happen that way. It was really Spain that first settled this country.
It's been said that winners write the history books. England wrote ours. Because of this, almost everything that we've been taught about how America was first settled is wrong. Spain first settled what is now the United States, and they did it with a charismatic, real-life John Wayne, Pedro Menendez de Avila. The story of the last conquistador is filled with espionage, piracy, and a race between two great European powers, France and Spain. This was a race to determine which country would settle our country, and it was a race that was held a half-century before the English settled Jamestown.
Now, the history of the United States was written initially by people in New England who took their point of view, their colony as beginning. They tended to ignore the Virginia settlement, but the Virginians also took their colony as the basis for the American story. And so those two stories in combination became the American myth of origins.
The race begins in the mid-1500s. Spain is the world's superpower. The Pope had given all of North America to Spain, with the exception of Canada. Spain called this territory La Florida. Not the state of Florida as we know it. It was the territory that included all of the lower 48 states. Within a few years, Spanish explorers discover vast silver bullion in the New World. France wants a piece of that pie. It resorts to licensed piracy.
Wars in Europe in this period always involved what some people called piracy and other people called illegitimate settling of economic differences. You couldn't count on courts to resolve merchant disputes, and so merchants would get a license from the government, with their own government usually, for a letter of marque and reprisal. And they would then take to the high seas, capture any ship of an enemy nation that they could find, and carry out your commerce rating and anything else you have in mind.
But a young Spanish seaman, Pedro Menendez de Avila, gets the attention of both countries. He captures so many French privateers that a bounty is put on his head. He is a hero to the Spanish people, and the king takes note of his success. But he is hated by some of the Spanish bureaucracy. He does not always follow the rules to win. France decides to take a bigger bite out of Spain's apple. They had one goal. France wanted total conquest of all of Spain's territories in the Americas, not just those in the colony of La Florida. Knowing that Spain's treasure fleet must pass next to Spain's claimed deepwater harbor of Port Royal Sound in present-day South Carolina, France decides to create a settlement there. The year is 1562. When the settlement fails, France strikes again. It sends 300 men to the present Jacksonville, Florida area, and they build a second fort, Fort Caroline. Soon, Spain captures French deserters from Fort Caroline. They confess that another French armada plans to reinforce Fort Caroline, and within a few months. Now, Spain's King Philip is alarmed. He bypasses the bureaucracy and personally appoints Pedro Menendez to be his last conquistador. King Philip also sends his best spy to Dieppe to confirm France's plan to invade La Florida, Spain's new colony. What he discovers is shocking. The race is now on, a race to be the first to land at Fort Caroline near Jacksonville. It's a race between France's Admiral Jean Ribault and Spain's Pedro Menendez de Avila. Ribault has a record as a strong, steady leader. Spain's Menendez has the spirit and sense of urgency of a real leader.
So what Spain's response was, overall, an actual race between France and Spain to get here by day. So the decision on who would control the country for the first 100 years was a race. They basically leave at the same time, but halfway across the ocean, a huge hurricane hits the Spanish fleet. And they pull in with only 5 badly damaged ships.
To avoid an ambush, Menendez takes his force of badly damaged ships through uncharted and dangerous islands just to save a few days. However, France's Jean Ribault arrives at the mouth of the St. Johns River first, but only by a few days. Menendez retreats 30 miles south to a shallow port called St. Augustine, but he does not wait for Ribault to attack him. When he sees a hurricane approaching the coast, he makes a daring and dangerous move. He takes 500 men inland through 35 miles of swamps and rivers to surprise Fort Caroline. He destroys the fort and most of the French soldiers.
End result, Menendez loses that race by about 2 days, but ends up winning the war.
With the French wiped out of La Florida, Pedro Menendez went to work on his plan. La Florida became the first European colony in what is now the U.S. And Santa Elena became the first major European settlement in our country. It lasted 21 years, and Spain's colony of La Florida lasted for 218 years.
Children should start knowing the story of his own nation. How can you love your nation and knowing your roots if you don't know your story?
Today, many Americans do not see a bright future ahead of them. They are fearful of their economy, fearful for their safety. They need to be reminded that America has traveled this ground before. They need to be reminded that there were even more dangerous times when our ancestors overcame huge barriers. Spain was the first European country to settle this nation. It changes our written history. It changes world history. We have a new hero, a visionary, an entrepreneur, a leader, and an inspiration. This is the building block of our American way of life.
Pedro Menendez de Avila was the American Conquistador.